Every Night is Game Night, episode 33, top apps of the first half of 2017. Hey everybody, welcome back to Every Night is Game Night. This is episode 33. This week we're going to be talking about board game apps from the first half so far of 2017. This is Anthony, once again with Jason.
Yo, my peoples, what's up?
And we have a special guest with us this week to talk about board game apps, Suzanne Sheldon. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you so much for having me, everybody. I really appreciate it.
We needed somebody to talk about apps, so we pulled in the absolute expert in the board gaming universe.
I love it. I love this idea that I'm an expert on something. It's very exciting.
Everyone else took a step back, and you were just kind of standing there, so hey.
Exactly right. Darn it. Well, I'll try to make up something good.
Cool. So we figured that, there's so much stuff dropping. We figured that we would just kind of get it all out there in a little bit of a meaty episode. And then we'll check back in with the rest of the apps because there's so much more coming, which I'm sure we'll get into. But we are going to talk about 5 different apps. We've all not played the same app, so we're all just kind of chip in our different expertise. But the first app that we're going to start with is the newest app. As of recording, is not officially released, but it should be hitting by the time or near when this episode drops. It is Race for the Galaxy. Suzanne, you have had a chance to sink your fingers into this one. What do you think?
So Race for the Galaxy, it is releasing, hopefully maybe even by the time this episode actually lands, but it's not out when we're recording. I was lucky enough to be part of the beta. And I got to say, I'll start off by saying Race for the Galaxy, I owned. I had a couple of the expansions, and I traded it away years ago.
No.
I know, and I have a lot of my friends have that exact reaction, and I know it makes me a very awful person that deserves punishment. But, for me, it got a little clunky. There was a lot going on. I struggled with the iconography. I think I didn't have the best learning experience with it, and it just never clicked. And then Roll for the Galaxy came out, and I basically fell in love with that game. But I was excited to hear about the Race for the Galaxy app and jumped on it as soon as I could. And for everybody who doesn't know, Race for the Galaxy is kind of a tableau builder where you're exploring different planets or areas, and it's kind of a race to get 12 planets or territories out in front of you, and then it's victory point based. But it's also this action selection. It's got this really cool action selection thing going on where there's all different actions, like you can develop or you can colonize a planet, you can develop a territory, you can get resources, all this other stuff. And if you select an action, you usually get an extra bonus from it. But you also get to take the actions that your opponents select too. And I really love that. You see that in like San Juan as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's a great mechanism. And so in Race for the Galaxy, you select your actions, you build your planets, bada bing. But there's just a lot of iconography going on with all the victory points and planet types and military and all this other stuff. And it can be a bit overwhelming. So when I jumped into the Race for the Galaxy app, I was really hoping that it would make the game somehow more consumable for me so I could play it. And I have to say, I think the team who created this app did a phenomenal job. I'm falling in love with Race for the Galaxy through this app. And so much so that now I'm kind of tempted to maybe I need to buy the game again. Yeah, they've done a phenomenal job. Everything is clean and simple. I think where they really did a great job is the tutorial. They did it in a very smart way where it's a 3-step tutorial, and it gets progressively not harder, but they give you more to work with each round. So in the first round, they actually limit the number of actions that you have available to you just so you can learn those specific actions. And then the next round, they add a couple more. And then the third round, you have all the actions. But because they kind of progress you through that step by step, I just found it very easy to learn. And I thought that was a great approach to the teach. And now I feel like I understand Race for the Galaxy better thanks to the app.
Did that help you kind of unlock all the iconography?
It really actually did, because the tutorial steps you through that and it puts it in a context in the moment of the game, which super duper helps me. So I thought that was awesome. And, from an overall implementation of the app, all the art and card layout, they chose to not change up the look of the card game very much. So like the cards look exactly like they do if you played them physically, which on a phone, I will say, is pretty small. And certainly you're going to be straining your eyes to see the icons without zooming into the card. But that said, they implemented a really easy zoom function where you can kind of press and hold on a card and it zooms right up. And not only does the card enlarge, but then a little description of each action appears next to it. So not only do you get to see the card bigger and all the context of the card, but it actually gives you in-context instructions or details on the actions, which again, as a learning tool, that is hugely, hugely helpful. So everything about the game is, I find, to be very intuitive. You slide the card to the center area to play it. There's little tool tips that say, hey, drag one more card to discard and then hit OK. There's an undo button. So if you accidentally discard a card you didn't mean to before you hit OK, you can undo that and start over. You can hold down on any of the actions and it'll remind you what it does and what the bonus is. And to conserve screen space, you can't see your opponent's full card tableau, but you can tap on their screen and then it expands and then you can see your tableau. That's just kind of a screen real estate saving technique, which works pretty well. I've been playing it on my phone and on my tablet, and I like it on both. But without a doubt, I think a tablet screen's a little friendlier since the cards do have a lot going on it, on each individual one. And certainly, the bigger the screen, the easier it is to read. But Race for the Galaxy, I am loving. I've already played a test game online with somebody else. It plays asynchronously. You get a little, hey, it's your turn now. And that worked like a dream. So this is a real winner. I really like it.
You have the beta loaded up, right, Anthony?
Yeah, I had a little bit of a chance to play it. Probably not as much, but I mean, my first experience was on the phone, and I remember thinking the same thing. Wow, this is pretty well done. I did not expect to be able to see anything with all the little icons. I have a hard enough time with those on the cards, let alone on a 4.5-inch screen. But yeah, no, it's fantastic so far. I'm looking forward to this one when it comes out in full, and there's people online, and all the features are in there. But I think, to your point, Suzanne, them figuring out a way to teach the game intuitively and quickly was probably the key to this working, and I feel like they did that because I had a similar experience. I still own Race for the Galaxy, but I play Roll a lot more. I have that as well, and for the same reason, it's I feel comfortable playing either at this point, but it's a lot easier to teach the latter, and the curve there is a bit tough.
I agree, and so I'm really happy. I was excited to hear that there's an app coming out because obviously Race for the Galaxy is practically a seminal game at this point. But just one that had missed the mark for me. And I'm so happy that it's going to kind of re-enter my world thanks to this app. The only other thing I wanted to point out is that because some of my experience, like super experienced hardcore Race for the Galaxy friends were like, it's no good without any expansions. And so I took a look, and they are launching with 2 expansions, the Gathering Storm and the Rebel versus Imperium. So
what?
So people who are worried about that, you have to pay up for them, which I think is actually really fair. But they are going to be available, which I think is also very cool.
Yeah. The problem with the base game, and this was actually also a problem with the solo bot that came in the first expansion, was that there's one strategy that really works, that produce consume strategy, where you're just like producing a whole bunch of stuff and then consuming it all at times 2. If you get that engine going, that it just that you win. Doesn't matter if you're facing military, if you're facing developments, or get your engine going, you win. The solo bot in the first expansion cheats, and they just really hammer that home. So you're sitting there going, oh, you've just produced 20 points on turn 7. It's like, damn it. You suck. So I'm curious. I don't know if you guys have played this enough, probably not, but I'm curious to see how the app handles the prevalence of that one strategy, and see if the AI kind of breaks it up a little bit, or I'm happy to know that there's other cards that are coming into the system, the expansion cards, so that also helps break it up a little bit. So I'm pretty pumped.
Yeah. Anthony, I don't know about your experience, but I suspect that the AI has been coded to break that up a little bit.
Yeah, I think so too. I haven't had any issues so far.
There you have it.
So, all right. So we're going to bounce back and forth. We got a lot of apps to cover. A lot of stuff, good stuff out there. Anthony, tell us about Tokaido.
Tokaido. So I saw this one about a year ago. One of the cons, they had a beta up that you could look at on the pad in the booth. And remember thinking, well, Tokaido's kind of a pretty simple game. I don't know what you do with an app of that. I like the game a lot. I own it, and it's one of those games like you always describe to people. It's like it's the relaxing thing you do at the end of the game night when you're done. Exactly, when you're done destroying each other or playing the 4-hour Euro. You play Tokaido. It's a nice, easy, leisurely stroll. It's these act of traveling. It's like 4 days, and you go and you see the hot springs, and you collect souvenirs, and you stop at the temples, and at the end of the day, each round of the game, or each section of the game, you stop and you get some food at the inn. It's very relaxing. There's nothing really stressful about it. I guess people could steal your spaces, but otherwise, it's very, very straightforward. You have all these spaces on the board. The person in the back goes first or goes next every time, and they go as far forward as they want. There's different spaces on here to do different things. You can go to the shop. You can go to the temple. You got the hot springs. You have these 3 different locations. It'll give you pieces of a panorama that you're painting. And the goal is to collect points, is to have the nicest trip, see the most cool stuff. And there's some bonuses at the end of the game based on, who has the most of certain things, who completes certain panoramas first. But in the end, there's nothing too stressful about it. So it's pretty low key. It's a good family game. It's good for kind of weaning people into hobby board games. If you're meeting up with new people, board game night, it's very low key. So for an app, I was wondering, well, what do they do with that that makes it worthy of having an app? And there's no reason you can't have that same experience digitally as you do on the table, but it's not this big, epic soloing experience. What they did is they created this little world. You're walking along a path. You have your little characters. They're animated. They're doing stuff. Each of these buildings is fully fleshed out, and you move along the path, and you can tap your space and go there. If you go in the shop, you see this nice shopkeeper, and he shows you the 3 different items you can purchase. If you go to one of the panorama spaces, you'll sit down and you'll paint it, and it'll kind of fill itself in as you go, and as you add to that panorama, it'll show more of it. It's really, really pretty. From a pure design perspective, it looks very nice. It manages to capture what makes the board game so appealing and do it in a slightly different way, because it is animated. There are bits and pieces moving around, but it has a very similar aesthetic. The actual gameplay elements they're all there. It's all the same. There's nothing missing from it. It's a pretty simple game, so I don't know what additional would be needed. You don't get really a lot of, once you get through the tutorial, which is pretty straightforward, you don't get a ton of information on screen about what you're doing. There's a menu you can go into and see what all the different achievements are, but it's never quite clear what you're scoring points for. How many points you get for XYZ. They do tell you as you go, but understanding what the goal is, what you're trying to do to win the game, it's a little more difficult, but it doesn't take very long to pick up on. So
that's one of the criticism I have of the app. Actually, is the rules are very unclear. I had to go back to my copy of Tokaido and open up the rules to figure out 10 points for the most temple donations, and 157 or 1357 points for the sets. They don't make that clear. You have to kind of know that ahead of time or play a whole bunch. And I was a little bit disappointed with that. I think I remember, Suzanne, you're not a big fan of when like the rules are it's kind of like a link to a PDF.
Right. Yeah.
As opposed, they don't even do that. They don't have an in-game rule thing, and they don't have a link to a PDF. They have nothing.
Exactly. They do have a tutorial. There is a fully interactive tutorial in the app, but having the actual rule book built into the app, I think is kind of a must-have feature, and so you've exactly run into an example of when it's frustrating when it's not.
Yeah, so it's a little bit unclear. Obviously, people who have played are not going to have a problem, but if you're new, and we have a lot of listeners, which is actually really surprising to us, we'll get private messages from listeners who are like, "Oh, I just discovered board games yesterday and I discovered your podcast." So just, I really want to kind of talk to that group as well. If you get into Tokaido, it's an excellent app. I think Anthony agrees. Like, it's a good port. It's a good night, nice light. Let's, cook dinner, change the baby while we play this game, whatever it is. But that tutorial issue, it doesn't need to be. Like, it's so easy to just integrate rules. Maybe I'm just being naive about it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like they thought I don't know if they thought anything about it at all, but it is a fairly simple game, so they maybe overdid it in trying to simplify. I hadn't played the game in maybe a year or so, a little year and a half, and I kind of dove back in and everything kind of clicked based on the tutorial. But if I'd never played it before, I'm not sure where I would be. So I guess I don't have that perspective. But yeah, it is definitely an issue. Like the scoring in particular, I remember getting to the end of the game and being like, okay, wait, how did I win that achievement? And how many points did I get for it? I'm not 100% sure how that works. But that's definitely one of the weaker points.
How did my opponent get 98 points? When did that happen?
Yeah, right. Yeah, because in the board game, a lot of that's printed on the board, so you can just see it regardless of the rulebook.
Well, and you also see what's going on with your opponents in front of you a little more in like a quick glance kind of view, or you can see, their panoramas as they're building up and things like that. So it's easier, right, to track what your opponents are going for and plan ahead. In the app, and I think this is partly the nature of app gaming, everything's hidden behind trays, right, and extra tap, just because you only have so much screen to work with. But like when you in a game like Tokaido, that is really relaxed and really easy, but does kind of rely on you being aware of what your opponents are going to go for. I think things like that impact your app gaming experience a little bit more because of the form factor, for sure.
So yeah, I mean, for me, I play it a lot, but I do have to acknowledge a little niggles with it. So, just kind of there's something to be aware of when you dive into the app. But, I think generally we all agree, recommended. And definitely if you play with the fast AI. Not only is the game faster, it is hilarious.
Yes.
Those little old men and the little girl with the teddy bear just booking it down the path.
Yeah, I like the idea that it didn't speed up the AI. It just speeds up the characters as they travel. I thought that was hilarious.
Definitely don't miss that one. Okay, so from the light, airy, misty mountains of Tokaido to the big monolith, brain-burning mega thing that is Terra Mystica, Suzanne.
Oh, Terra Mystica. Now, I have to, the idea of a Terra Mystica app is so appealing, right? Because it's Terra frickin' Mystica. And it's one of those games that just, if you like a little bit of a heavier Euro game, most people I know enjoy Terra Mystica. But the idea of making an app out of Terra Mystica just seems ridiculous because there's so much going on. I mean, think about Terra Mystica on the table. It takes up the entire table between the player boards and the cult track board and all of the tokens and then, the main board itself. It's a table hog. So the idea of bringing that over with all the different moving pieces was a daunting concept even. And I mean, for people who aren't familiar with Terra Mystica, it's a heavier Euro game about, you play different fantasy races like giants or witches or, I don't know, yetis and all this other stuff. And you're just trying to you have this map and you're trying to terraform different land types to your own preferred land type and then build up your little cities. And you can upgrade your different buildings and get different abilities. Meanwhile, there's this other thing. Apparently there's like a church or something over there, like with this cult track, and you're trying to influence priests over there, and there's different kinds of income, and there's shipping, and there's a lot to keep track of and a lot to manage, and it's really entertaining because there's also this Mancala element where to take certain actions you need to use what they literally call like the power bowls, which I always think is funny. And you've got like this Mancala like element where you can only spend tokens that are in the third bowl, but you have to move them from the first to the second floor and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, there's a lot going on. But for people who know and love the game, it's an incredibly rewarding game. And as they've expanded it, they've kind of added so much diversity to it that the games can feel really different between each other. So, again, the idea of an app to allow you to refine your strategies or to play different races that you normally don't get to play and things like that, there's a lot appealing about it. Well, the group that took on Terra Mystica is Digidiced, which, as far as I'm concerned, is kind of the top tier of board game app makers right now. They released in rapid succession, pretty much, Le Havre and Laporte, Patchwork, and Agricola, All Creatures Big and Small. So they kind of have this thing going with these Rosenberg two-player games. All of them are really, really well done. But Terra Mystica was a huge, huge jump up in complexity from those games, right? Well, I got some pre-release time with it, which was very exciting. And then, now it's out for everybody. And from everything I can tell, both from my own experiences and from feedback, Digidiced did a phenomenal job with this app. It's got AI. First of all, it's on iOS, Android, and Windows, and it got greenlit for Steam. So it's already out for iOS, Android, and Windows. And then it should be up on Steam within the next month. And you can play cross-platform. So if your friend has an Android phone and you have an iPhone, you can play against each other. And I think that that's a hugely important feature for board game apps right now because you can't control what platforms people are using, and they want to play with each other. It does have multiple AIs, and it does, it has that online play. And ultimately, I think Digidiced made really smart, tough choices about the user interface to make all of the elements of Terra Mystica consumable on a small screen. What they ultimately had to do was break the board into different kind of sections for the different kind of elements. So those power bowls I talked about, there's going to be a tray for those power bowls. So you're going to click on the little power bowl icon on the top, and then the power bowl just drops right down and you can see everything you need. Or for the kind of turn tiles and the special abilities there, or for the different kind of god powers that you can get, or for the cult track. These are all little, very tiny buttons along the top of the screen. And if you tap on them, then all the information kind of flows down very quickly in an easy to read tray. The icons at the top are hard to see. Even on a tablet, they're pretty small. So if you have sight issues, this is going to be a challenge. And if you're not familiar with the game, it's going to take you a little bit of time to get used to. But I've played it so much now, it's practically second nature. The iconography, although it's small, it is well done, and everything makes sense once you understand what it represents. The other compromise they made was you have a character, and it's all the characters have this little surrounding bit of information around them in the bottom of the screen. And it's just really, really, really small. And there's a lot of things going on down there. Once you get familiar with it, it all makes sense. So you have kind of a quick snapshot of how many tablets you have in your power bowls, or you have a quick snapshot of how many priests you have available, or how many cubes, or how many gold. But again, there's a lot going on down there, and it's very, very, very tiny. So I know that can be tough for some players as well. All of that said, I think the app is great. There's a full kind of turn log, so you can always see what's going on. You can undo your turn if you have a mistake. There are tool tips everywhere, so that as you're trying to take an action, if you don't remember what it is, you can quickly kind of access that information. There is a full-on tutorial to help you walk through. I've gotten mixed feedback on how good people feel like the tutorial is. Some people think, it's not as good as they want it to be, that kind of thing, which to some degree is pretty understandable because it's a really complicated game. But I think for what they had to work with, Digidiced did a great job, and I personally am a big fan of the Terra Mystica app. What do you guys, have you had a chance to crack into it, or have you tried it, or am I the only one who's had a chance to dig into it?
Yeah, I've had a decent amount of time to play with this as well. Terra Mystica is actually one of my favorite games. So when they announced this, which, by the way, it was only a month before it came out, so it wasn't one of these tortured developments where we've known about it for a year. And we're like, when are you going to release this stupid game?
7 Wonders.
Yeah, right.
So I was psyched, and then it hit, and then you expect it to be buggy or have any problem, and it doesn't. And obviously the pedigree here of the developer is fantastic, but I've played multiple games on my phone, and we were just talking about like phones and how much space there is and everything, and just like you said, the interface here is just so well done. I have a friend who just kept asking me, before paying the money for it, but can you see everything? How do they do the board? There's so much stuff there. And it was almost hard to explain because they've broken it into so many different pieces, and describing it makes it sound like kind of a mess. But when you look at it, it's all very intuitive. Like, it makes sense where everything is. The icons they use for each of these little drop downs make sense if you've played the game before. This is not the way I would want anybody to learn this game. Like, if you've never played Terra Mystica before, this app is going to be pretty overwhelming, I think. But I don't think that's who it's for. That's the same as trying to learn like Le Havre or Agricola specifically through the app. There's so much going on, and it gets tiny. You don't know what to zoom in on. It probably takes a little while, and you're probably not going to learn the game fully. And refreshing a little bit on the rules, trying to go through the tutorial to see how it is. I'm not sure how clear that made it, but I'm not sure how clear it can make it when you're trying to explain, 12 different races and what all they can do and all these different things and how they interact with each other. But the ability to, at a glance, see the entire map, see all of your opponents and where they're at on all their stats and their points, and do quick taps here to, remind yourself of the terraforming, to look at your board. It's just great. I mean, I never thought I'd be able to play Terra Mystica on my iPad in 45 minutes. So that alone, it's been pretty cool.
I'm so glad to hear that you're enjoying it.
I have to admit, I got nothing here. I walked in the tabletop day on, I think, what was tabletop day? Saturday? Sunday? I forget. But I walked in and I saw Terra Mystica laid out. A couple of my friends are playing it. I think I got a little lightheaded and I'm like, oh, I can't. I'm glad you guys are having fun though.
Come on.
So have you never played Terra Mystica?
I played it once. It's all if it comes to a Euro, it has to be I have to get into the theme in order to unlock the mechanics, right? So like a big game like Mage Knight. Mage Knight's a pretty heavy game for me anyway, but I can like the way that game does like Night and Day and the fantasy theme and the exploration, I can understand how the deck construction works and all that kind of stuff. Like one has to happen in order for the other to happen. For Terra Mystica, it really felt like I was moving this grape from this bowl to this other bowl in order to move this cube and this triangle to this hex. And it just felt like mechanisms for mechanism's sake. The theme just was like it could be absolutely anything, which they're making a space version of it. So there's your evidence that the theme could be absolutely anything. And so it just doesn't. I just can't do it. And Anthony and I did an episode earlier, I think it was late last year, about how apps and analog games, so like physical board games, they're different in that you can learn better on a physical board game. So like I actually had a chance to play the physical board because you just learn better. The brain learns better. On an app, I just like what Anthony was saying, I just don't think a new person would have a shot.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think if you really want to learn and all you have is the app, you can make it work. But I don't think it's going to be the easiest journey, especially if you have no context whatsoever. So I can definitely see that for sure. And I totally get what you're saying about the theme too. I like the moving the grapes in the bowl. I'm going to call them that.
Like, I mean, it's just like the type of games, like, Anthony is not a huge fan of like time stories or whatever, and that's kind of where I am, like the thematic co-op stuff. So those big heavier Euros, I'll play them. Like, and there's some that I do enjoy, like Through the Ages I really enjoy because I can get into the civilization building and stuff. But this one, for whatever reason, like, why do I have to put 4 grapes in the bowl and move the 2 grapes in order to turn the small cylinder into a big let me change the hex into a grass. That's all I want.
I think I twitch a little every time you say grape. I don't know.
All right. Well, actually, I realized looking at this list, I organized the app order very poorly because we're going from Terra Mystica to Onirim.
Okay.
Nice.
So, Anthony, you've been playing a fair amount of Onirim.
I have, yeah. It's so we've talked about Onirim plenty. Everybody knows this one, especially if you're listening to this podcast. But real quick, for those who are stepping in new or have not had a chance to play this one yet, you have a deck of cards. In that deck of cards are 8 doors, 2 of each color, and what you're trying to do is get all of those doors out of the deck before you run out of deck. Also in the deck are a bunch of nightmare cards. When those come up, you have to get rid of keys or cards or doors to get rid of the nightmare. So you'll be basically taking a hand of cards and playing them in order. You need to get 3 of the same color in a row, but they can't be the same symbol, or to have a key in your hand when a door comes out of the deck. And then if you get all 8 out, you win. If you don't and you run out of cards, you lose. And that's it. That's Onirim. The app is exactly that. And there are a bunch of expansions. If you bought this board game in the store today, it comes, I think, with 8 expansions now. So
7.5. The little meeple guy is like a half expansion.
7.5, but a lot. There's a lot of ways to play the game. And once you get into it, you kind of want some of those other ways to play the game. So the base version of the game it's pretty simple. And you can, in the app, you can kind of tell. Like, the tutorial takes like 3 minutes if you've never played it before. And even still, like, once you get into the game, it's very, very quick. Everything is very, very smooth. You can dive into a game immediately. It deals all your cards out. It does all the shuffling for you. Thank you. The only part I don't like about this game.
That is the best thing for sure.
Oh my gosh. My like every time I do it, I'm like, man, these cards are going to fall apart. I don't want to sleeve them though.
Yeah.
And so like a game of Onirim on the app takes, I don't know, 5 minutes. It's fantastic. It's quick. It's easy. You can do several games in a row and kind of, hone your skills. It keeps track of your statistics, so you can see how many you've won. You can see what your best quote-unquote score is, meaning how many cards were left in the deck. I like it a lot. I mean, as a fan of Onirim and the Oniverse in general, it is a perfect rendition, in my opinion, of this game without any of the expansions. So putting that out there, those of you out there who've played this and feel like you need the expansions to play it further, these are not there yet, but I have to imagine they'll be there in the future.
Yeah, I definitely the only thing I don't love about this app is that the expansions don't already exist in it. I've talked to the Asmodee digital team, and what I will say is they like being responsive. So if people love the Onirim app and want the expansions, they definitely should let the Asmodee digital team know so that they can kind of, nudge up the priority of that work internally, because, gosh, I love this app. I love seeing, because I talk about apps a lot of people talk to me about apps a lot. And so like people are sharing their, screenshots of their scores and kind of having like this little friendly competition for who can have the most cards left over in their deck when they win and things like that. And it's so much fun.
Yeah. There was a big thing on Reddit when the app first came out. I think the rumor had gone around that the Asmodee team was not going to make expansion, that this was going to be it. And people were like, no. And, doing what Reddit does. And it's like, come on. If the game sells, they're going to make expansions. If the game doesn't sell, they won't sell expansions. I mean, it's not like there's no, all the game has to do is sell. And if the screenshots are, happening, I see them on Facebook, on Reddit, on Twitter, as long as people are posting up, we're going to get some expansions. I mean, come on. But I definitely agree. This game is fabulous and it needs expansions. It's the only criticism I have.
Yeah, I think so.
Nice.
Once those are in there, it's, it was between this and the game. If I need something quick in 5 minutes on the phone, just to run through, it's these two. And this one has the potential for so much more with all those expansions. Mm-hmm. So here's hoping they come soon. Let's bug them.
Yeah. All right. So I'm actually going to take this last one because I got some stuff to say.
Oh boy.
About Mysterium. So this game came out a little bit before all these other games. A lot of people know Mysterium. I don't want to take too much time talking about it, but just in case you don't know, this is a cooperative game where one player is behind a screen and they're a quote-unquote ghost who was murdered. They cannot talk, And the only way that they can communicate is through these very artistic cards. And what they're trying to communicate to the other players who are playing, like, what is it? Seance people, like people that can read spirits or whatever. What do you call them? Mediums. That's
Mediums, yeah.
There you go. So the ghost is trying to communicate through these mediums. They can't talk. They can only communicate through these cards. And not going to go through the whole thing, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to use these lovely, very artistic cards, think Dixit type cards, and they're trying to lead the mediums into discovering who killed them, where did they die, and what was the murder weapon. And eventually you kind of do a process of deduction, happens over multiple rounds. The group is trying to ascertain who is the killer and get all that information down, all while the ghost is trying to not communicate. So very, very social game. Cannot emphasize this enough, right? So there's an app for this. And I don't know what you thought, Suzanne. I know Anthony's not a huge fan of this game. When I first thought this was going to be an app, I'm like, what? This game? So anyway, so Mysterium hits. I was curious. I got it. There are a couple positives with this game. One, it's in keeping with the recent trend of apps just getting better and better and better and better. You notice that we've had very little like negative stuff to say in terms of the actual presentation and the flow and the functionality of the apps. They're all getting better and better. Mysterium is no different. Very, very slick. The graphics are great. The cards are sharp. The music is really cool. They have like eerie music with footsteps. That's all cool. They have talking about real estate on the screen. They do show the cards, but how they get around that whole real estate issue is that you can zoom in on the cards with a little magnifying glass, so you can kind of see all the little details in the card and everything. So that's cool. That's a nice little touch. And it also works really well as multiplayer. So you can go online. There's no pass and play, which is kind of I'm not sure why they made that decision. But you can go in an online game, and that's actually pretty cool. Like they have a really great chat functionality. The mediums can all talk to each other, and one player is playing the ghost, and it really is kind of cool how the app does that. If you are into that online stuff, you can play medium, you can get a game. It's pretty quick. There's always games going on. Great. Now, as a solo, this app makes me really mad. I don't get mad at it's an app, for crying out loud. We're playing with toys. But just because all right, let me take a step back. So what the app does is you can play through a tutorial, which is kind of the story mode. So you're playing a couple games as a medium. The AI is giving you clues. Once you get past that, eventually you become the ghost, and then you give clues to the AI, who they're playing the medium, and then you kind of get through that. And eventually you kind of unlock these different modes where you can play either as one or the other in a quick pickup game or whatever it is, as the medium or as the ghost, all solo. Man, this AI is it kills me. The best way I could describe it is if you go on a date with somebody and you're just getting to know the person, and then you go out on a second date and a third date and a fourth date and a fifth date, and they still don't know you. They still you're still talking and you're trying to communicate things. They just don't get it. So if you're in playing, let's say you're playing the ghost and you're giving out a card, and you're just dying for them to be like, no, the last 4 cards I gave you meant this. Listen, for God, I don't know, I don't know what your experience was with this. I don't know if you played the online or the multiplayer or the solo player, but the solo player just it makes me wonder what they were thinking making this game.
Well, so first of all, as far as how I feel about Mysterium, it's literally in my top 10 games of all time. I love Mysterium. I've played it 50 or more times. It's one of my favorites. I adore it. So I'm coming to the app with that attitude, right? But similar to you, I remember thinking, how the heck are they going to do that? And similar to you, it's a gorgeous atmospheric experience, and they made a lot of really smart choices. And like you, the AI completely flummoxes me. I
Oh,
don't get upset about it though. Like you're very emotional.
oh
I
my
probably
goodness.
I probably
It's
don't
the
get
whole thing of
emotional.
like it's like Skynet and Terminator. It's like this is the creeping towards like computers trying to replace human beings, and this is completely irrational on my part. But it's like, oh my god, technology intruding into my brain. Get out.
Well, then you should be happy that it's totally weird and wonky and wrong because then like the technology is not there yet. But
That's probably true.
but I view it more like a puzzle when I play it solo and more trying to figure out the AI itself and okay, well, what would it consider? Which isn't so dissimilar from what you're doing with people in real life. It's like, okay, it's not just about how you think, right? You have to think about how these, your teammates think and what they're going to clue in on. But with AI, certainly it's a bit more confusing. So,
Yeah.
is Mysterium my go-to for a solo? Absolutely not. All of that said, and I like the online okay. I think it works okay, but it's not my favorite way to play either. The way I absolutely love this app and will play it all the time is a bunch of friends with the app over Skype. And so, yeah, and Mysterium added the ability to create kind of like private rooms now so strangers can't jump into your game. So a bunch of friends and I get on Skype, we load up our Mysterium app and we play Mysterium using the app together as a group. And because we're on Skype, we can see each other, we can talk to each other, we can have that kind of interpersonal thing going on. Because we're friends, we kind of have a sense of each other and what to go for. So that makes that whole thing a little bit easier. And the idea of playing Mysterium, which is one of my favorite games, with a friend in Toronto and a friend in Arkansas and a friend down the street, it's amazing. So if you have a group of friends or a group of people like that where you could play Mysterium online together, this app does a phenomenal job of kind of facilitating that, and it's so much fun.
I definitely agree that the multiplayer is really well done. and very, very enjoyable. I think the solo it's funny because we're a solo gamers podcast. So I think a lot of us tend towards playing apps, even if it's an app on ourselves, we tend to we still want to play with the AI, try not to get into the online chats and all that kind of stuff. And everybody's different. But I think this audience is more likely to play something or expect a good solo experience out of something. And I mean, definitely buyer beware. It's a really frustrating experience. This app, it doesn't even emulate a human being. It emulates like a psychopath or something. It just throws out random stuff at you seemingly. And maybe a developer had kind of an idea of consistency, but I just don't. And I don't want to learn, because it's a robot and I'd rather learn about human beings. Anyway, so a giant miss for me. It's still beautiful. I do have to say, just as a kind of aside, I don't want to spend too much time with this, but like Asmodee Digital, like now we see why they did what they did, like the Asmodee company. So people who don't know, Asmodee is a pretty giant company at this point. They weren't giant all the time, but a couple years ago they merged with a couple of other giant companies, Fantasy Flight, Days of Wonder, and they went on this acquisition spree of getting Z-Man, and who makes Pandemic, and they got Carcassonne, and they got Catan. They got all these games, right? And they just grew as a company. People were like, oh my God, Asmodee is coming to get us. What's going to happen to the industry? I feel like this is what's going to happen to the industry, right? Like, that's what they did this for. They acquired all those companies and set all the prices and did what they did. Like, they've turned all that around, and they're making these apps. Like I was reading an article, it sounds like they've released this, they released Colt Express, Potion Explosion earlier, and they're releasing like 17 more titles in the next year or two. Like that's what they're using this money for. So at least it's not like some giant money grab. It's actually turning around and benefiting the community. Not everybody plays apps. I think a lot of hardcore gamers are still kind of like, grr, 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 why is my X-Wing so much more expensive and da-da-da. But at least, we have these cool toys to play with. I don't know how you feel about the whole thing with Asmodee and all that kind of stuff, Suzanne.
Well, I think I think the bigger thing with Asmodee is complex and multifaceted. And I've heard a lot about it from the retailer's perspective and from different smaller publishers and also from people who work with Asmodee and, some of the companies that are owned by Asmodee. So, I can see a lot of different sides to it. But as to Asmodee Digital and exactly what you're talking about, Jason, like the way that kind of consolidation has provided resources, right? Technical resources to create apps that might not have otherwise been created or might not have been created to the quality that they're being produced at right now. It's such a huge benefit. And I know what you're saying. I definitely hear a lot from people who, Suzanne, we really like your segments, but we just don't like, we want digital out of our games. And I actually really understand that. But from my bigger perspective, I get it. But there's a lot of benefit to board game apps. And one of those is the idea, at least for me, it's a benefit. It's the idea of using apps as a gateway to board games now, right? Because now you could have app gamers or video gamers that discover something like Onirim, right? And it's like, oh, they just want a quick solitaire game. Somehow they stumble on Onirim, and all of a sudden now they're like, whoa, what's this? And they look it up and they see that there's more and that there's like physical versions and all this stuff. And maybe we can kind of hook into them that way. But you're only going to do that if you can create really well done board game apps. And Asmodee Digital is definitely able to do that. They've proven that they're able to do that. Another example, and again, I'm not trying to rub it in or anything like that, but I have early access to the Jaipur app.
What?
And Jaipur is one of my all-time favorite two-player games. It's so much fun. And this app, Jason, I'm just not to make you feel bad, but it's so darn good.
I'll wait for it. I'll let you go ahead and you test them, give them feedback, make it even better so that when I get it, I can enjoy it the best that I can.
Yeah. So, I mean, if that's what Asmodee's merger or Asmodee Digital being part of that means, then I'm excited for at least that element of it, because I love what they're doing with apps for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely way more complicated than that. I mean, I know a lot of people have a lot of legitimate concerns. People with small businesses with online stores are like, oh my God, Asmodee, da 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 da. I like to take a step back. Something was a big news item for a little while ago on the boards and stuff. And it was very negative and a lot of flame. Like, at the very least, it's a company that is taking all this capital that they're building, and that's what they're doing. They're building capital, and they're, like you were saying, Suzanne, they're doing this multifaceted kind of outreach. They're really making great apps, which really cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop. Like, a board game doesn't cost that much. It costs time, not necessarily like that much capital. Apps are like, boom, I remember I was kind of chatting online. I asked Stephen Bonacore a question. He's like, nope, not doing apps, can't afford them. Yeah. And he has great games. Like, they really, a lot of stuff that he makes would translate very well to apps, but he's not even going to look at it, at least for now, because it's just too much money. But Asmodee can do that. And, and then these other companies that are just like you were saying, was it Digidice and Playdeck, and they have their own kind of niche, and they devote all their capital to it. So I'm really happy with the quality of apps. So, Anthony, what do you think? Do you love our new Asmodee overlords now, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in the same camp of it's complicated. I love the apps. I love some of the additional resources that go into things. But then, you've mentioned some of the periphery stuff that we're not talking about today, and it's hard to overlook some of that. Not that it's unique to this industry. If anything, it's new to this industry, but it's been around forever. This is what happens when mass quickly growing industries consolidate. But I think at least from our perspective, what we're talking about today, the apps and the ability to invest and the capital that they have, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I guess at least on that end, I think we can all agree. Just kind of let's keep the good apps coming.
Absolutely.
All right. So I know we're running a little bit long, but we have Suzanne, so this is a special occasion. We could run a little bit long. So I wanted to end with a little bit of rapid fire. I'm going to ask some questions of both Suzanne and Anthony, and they're going to answer as fast as they can, and then we're just going to move on to the next question. You guys ready?
Oh, boy.
Okay. So, which app have you spent the most time with?
Star Realms.
Star Realms. Anthony?
The game.
Your favorite almost board game app? So not a board game, but could be a board game or a card game. Think Solitarica, Frost, those kind of games.
Oh, probably. I think this could be a board game. The Battle for Polytopia. It's a little civ builder. It's with a tech tree. It's so much fun.
Cool. Anthony?
I'm trying to think. I'm all in board game mode now. I think probably Solitarica.
Favorite app from back in the day that badly needs an update?
Oh, well, that's easy. Kalis. I love Kalis, but that app could use a bit of updating.
Anthony?
We have a laundry list of apps that need to be updated so we can keep playing them.
Okay, I'll actually give one. Kingsburg. I loved Kingsburg when it came out. The AI was trash, but I loved the game and never got the expansion, and now it crashes on my iPad, so
yeah.
Oh well. Okay, forthcoming 2017 app that you are most excited about. So you mentioned Jaipur, Burgle Brothers, Through the Ages, Tide to Time, lots of them.
7 Wonders.
Yes!
Wishful thinking.
For those who don't know, 7 Wonders has been locked in development hell for maybe about 2 or 3 years now, perhaps longer.
Yeah.
Who the heck knows when that's coming out? So I think Suzanne is trolling us.
Possibly.
What do you think, man?
Through the Ages for sure.
Suzanne whetted my appetite for Jaipur. I love that little game.
Yeah.
Okay. Board game that you wish was an app.
You know, I'm going to say Automobiles. The pool building racing game.
Mage Knight. That would be cool.
All right. And this is the most important question of all. Pie, cake, or cookies?
Talk about a softball. The answer is pie. I will fight you if you disagree.
Well, in that case, I agree.
Yay!
Well, if we disagree, then Suzanne can have all the pie.
Oh, shoot. Oh, my gosh. I never thought of it from that angle. You're so right.
Like, I'm allergic to chocolate. So every girl that I've dated has been like, oh, really? Goody, give me all the chocolate. It's like, okay, here you go.
Awesome.
So yeah, if you follow Suzanne on Twitter, I believe you're 425 Suzanne.
Yes, that's me.
You're gonna see a lot of board game content. You're also gonna see a lot of pictures of pie.
Yes, indeed.
What about
and sometimes French fries. Sometimes French fries too.
What about it, man? Pie, cake, or cookies?
I think I'm also on pie.
Oh,
yeah, I dig me some pie.
you guys better have enough pie. You guys gotta get a nice big giant pie. All right, you have a special kind of pie? Is it a key lime pie person or?
It's just pie. Key lime's really good, but I think my favorite's actually strawberry rhubarb.
That's good. Yeah, it's totally seasonal for me. Depends on what time of year. Right now, apple pie is great. End of the year, it's got to be pumpkin pie.
I'll have to go to a convention and have a pie fest.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you very much for going through the rapid fire and going through the whole episode. This has been really, really awesome. I've had a lot of fun.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I love talking board game apps, and I'm really glad we got to do the show. Thank you.
All right, guys, so that's going to go and wrap up this episode of Every Night is Game Night. Thank you again, Suzanne, for coming on. It was a fantastic episode. It's one of our longer episodes, so if you guys like board game apps, this one's for you. Make sure you swing back later in the year, because we're definitely going to come back and cover some of these other Asmodee apps that we know are coming down the pike as a release. But for this week, that's going to go ahead and be everything. Make sure you check us out on BoardGamersAnonymous.com, as well as our Facebook group, Board Gamers Anonymous, on Twitter at BGA Podcast and at an ENGN Podcast. We spend a lot of time in the solo Board Gamers group on Facebook as well, so you can meet up with us there, leave your feedback and thoughts on the various questions that are posted in conversations. They always come up here on the podcast and help us share with the rest of the solo gamer community some of the insights on how to play better at home by yourself every night. But for this week, that's going to go ahead and be everything. So until next time, grab a solo game off your shelf and make every night game night.
Later, everybody.